Yeah, so I guess I can just tell a little bit about my story, but we I went to school, I went to university to study education and was in the classroom for a few years before having kids, which I feel like almost put me at a disadvantage when we started home educating our kids. Just my mindset had to change pretty dramatically. Um, but I think even as a very young school teacher, after having been through sort of the theory and the philosophy of education, even at 21, 22 years old, I remember thinking like, this isn't exactly what I signed up for. This isn't what I pictured this to be, And when you think that you're going to just be impacting all these children and allowing their gifts to shine and, to develop their individual talents, it's just kind of like,
Yes.
no, that's your hands are tied. So I, if anything, it just gave me a picture of what they were like missing out on, my kids, when we finally did decide. And my eldest was 4 or whatever it was, school when she would have been in kindergarten. Um, we kind of decided, well, our job at the time was very full on during the summer holiday in the US. And that led us to then in September think, okay, where is our holiday going to be if if we're working all summer long? Like, so it was just like, she's 4 years old, 5 years old, let's do this for a year and see what happens. And then it was like, we'll take it year by year, and then just fell in love with it. So yeah, we've got 5 children now, 16 down to 6 years old, and have home educated all the way through and have loved it. And as they get older, it just becomes more wonderful, because I get to learn from them now and alongside of them, and watch them grow into their giftings that just I believe that they were born with. And so, yeah, it's been great. Now we're in West London and Ealing, and love that London is our classroom. And we've, in the last couple of years, I started just a network, mostly because of COVID, out of necessity, put the word out there to see who's super, super local to where we were, because we didn't have a car. It was kind of that awkward, like you could go to the parks, but not indoors. And people started coming out of the woodwork, and we got to meet people right around us. And there's over 90 families now on a WhatsApp group, if you can believe it. And very little drama, because I have very strict rules about what can be posted and not posted. um, but it's been fascinating to meet just so many people from so many different walks of life and nationalities, and it's just such a diverse crowd. And I love hearing people's stories and connecting with community. So that leads kind of to where our my talk is, just about engaging purposefully with our community. And specifically, even though, obviously I love connecting with the local home ed community where I am, and I've learned so much from other home educators, this talk is primarily going to be about engaging with people who are not in that world, and just developing relationship with them and watching that grow into something that benefits, I think, both parties. So I'm going to start to share this presentation here. All right, and hopefully we can see this now, becoming an advocate in our own neighborhood. You can see that, right? And this is such an interesting time in the history of education here in the UK. And I think there may be the tendency to sort of feel like we need to be able to defend ourselves, which there is a bit of that. We do need to be able to do that. But I think also it's a time where we really have the ability to inspire other families around us as well, in the freedom that we've chosen to have in the way that we educate our kids. So that's sort of the emphasis that I want to have during this talk, is like, how can we both be inspired and like inspire families around us, businesses around us, artists in our community to, yeah, to just be excited about the freedom that we have to educate our children. And I I kind of started my blog as just a way that I could geek out about all of the educational philosophy that I love to read about. And so, but I also have always been interested in like community building and family. So kind of education, family, community, those three ideas merging and at this blog. So if you're interested, you could check that out. And I'm on Instagram. And actually this whole talk, I linked it to ourthrivinghive.com/community so that some of the, I guess you could say, posters or worksheets that I talk about in the talk are a little bit more clear. They're a little bit small in this presentation. So you can go back and look at that link. And just for some clarity, when I talk about neighborhood in this talk, I'm not necessarily just talking about the street where we live, although that is a big part of it. And I've loved to have gotten to know my neighbors in a really intimate way over the last 3 years since we've been in London. But neighborhood to me also, I'm also talking about where we work and where we play. So our workplace, or where we play at the park, at the library, at the gym, those places where we might frequent, the museums, the galleries, and places like this, the lives that we touch on a regular basis, and the places that we frequent on a regular basis is our neighborhood. Now, what is the end game in making these connections with the people and places in our neighborhood? And I just did want to make it clear that it's not to necessarily convince everybody that they should be home educating their child, because that wouldn't work for a whole bunch of reasons. But uh, I think the hope is that we would build with the people around us, we would build trust, which would lead to authentic relationship. And then again, it's just a way to bring hope to the people around us, because I've been involved in so many different conversations where a family is struggling with a child who's at school, and they come to me for not necessarily advice, but just to just express their heart, because they know like there's not many other places where they can go and not be told like, well, your child just needs to just kind of needs to suck it up and try harder and get back in there and they'll be fine, when they sense that something is really not fine. And so to be able to give, I mean, I had a conversation not long ago with just a neighbor across the street, and she just needed to be affirmed as a mom, and she needed to hear me affirm her son in the unique gifts that he had. And they haven't taken their kid out of school, but she knows that it's a real possibility, and she sees a family doing it that's a healthy and happy family. So she knows that that's always going to be an option. So I think the end game in having these conversations with people in our community is just to allow people to have an option, to give people another way, another glance at another perspective at how to do not only education, but how to do life. So I like this quote. It's from a book called, I think, Community Building. It's later on in the presentation. I've forgotten the name of the book. Trust grows from the experience of being together in ways that make a difference in our lives. And I've just had so much fun over the last 3 years making connections that make a difference in my life, in the life of my kids, and in the life of others. Which then, of course, leads to a sense of true community. And this is where my heart really is, that as we develop these relationships, that actually we get to the place in our relationships that no matter where our kids are educated, that we can form these bonds. And as it says here, right, we can go deeper than our masks of composure and develop some significant commitment to rejoice together, mourn together, delight in each other, making the other's condition our own. So that is the end game, at least in my mind, is to develop authentic community. And so, how do we go from just kind of putting ourselves out there a little bit to authentic community? Well, very simply, we can speak and we can do. And when I talk about speaking, there's kind of three parts to this. Let me just kind of, okay. So speaking, we need to know who we're talking to first. I love talking to people about home education. I love hearing people's stories. And when I engage somebody in a conversation about home ed or education in general, we really do need to know where the other person is coming from, because if I'm talking to an artist, we do lots of work in the artsy community here in West London. And when I'm talking to an artist about home ed, they get it immediately. They understand what it means to be outside the box and to want to learn in your own way and to follow your passion and all these things. But that's very different than, like, for example, I stayed at an Airbnb one time, and it was at the house. It was one of those like shared situations, which was the first time I'd ever done that in somebody else's house while they were like in the house. But it was a retired head teacher that, and we had just time to chill, and so it could have potentially been very awkward. But the conversation led to education, and she shared a little bit of her background, which always makes me a little nervous when it's a teacher, especially a head teacher. And this was at a retired head teacher, so pretty much she had invested her entire life in the school system. But ended up having a really neat conversation about just educational, what's the point of education? What is it for? And whereas she was kind of tiptoeing a little bit and not super quick to like jump on the, oh yeah, I totally get you. She was very polite and respectful, and I was able to affirm her in just a life spent dedicated to education. And the bottom line was like, we're on the same team here. And I think when we're talking to people, especially in that world, to be able to affirm, like, yeah, I hear you. We're trying to get the same thing done, and we're just going about it in different ways. So knowing who we're talking to is really important. And the best way to know that is just to ask what their story is before launching into a tirade of our thoughts about education. Other ways that we can sort of pick the minds of the people that we're talking to, and this is one of them on that link that I shared at the beginning, that you can kind of zoom in and see these questions a little bit more, bigger. So these questions that are just some thought-provoking questions that we can keep in our minds when engaging others. What is education for? How would you define success for your children? What would be the most effective learning environment? And even just asking them about their history in education, like, what did you enjoy about school? What did you not? What did you wish that you could have had in school? Again, to think about, where is this person coming from before we enter into some more controversial, maybe type topics. Another aspect of speaking with somebody is knowing what we're talking about. And our personal stories, I tell people all the time, like, don't ever underestimate the power of your personal story, where you've come from, what you've had to walk through, and where you are now. I think that's probably the most powerful thing that you can share with somebody else, because they can't really nobody can really shut that down because it's what you truly lived. Um, why do you home educate or participate in alternative traditional school session? What's your philosophy of education? I think having solid answers for why we're doing what we're doing is really important. And I mean, this conference, right, has been great because we get to hear from Naomi Fisher and Peter Gray and Gina Riley, these people who have done like all this research so that we can pretty confidently share with other people. But we do need to kind of know a little bit about maybe the research, the philosophy behind it. And the last little bullet point here I have is, what's your elevator speech? Um, that quick 2 or 3 minute conversation when you're on the train with somebody and you get into this really brief conversation about education and, what is it? Why do you home educate? So for me, usually the two little bits that I share, if I only have like 3 minutes, are that I get to tailor my kids' education to their interests. And we have a lot of flexibility as far as our holiday time, because that piques people's interest really quickly when you talk about how much money you can save as a home educator going off peak on your holiday. So let's see, here's a little bit more in depth. Again, all these links are on that on the website. But I like to, I hear the same questions, and you probably too, over and over and over and over again. So kind of having just some quick answers in our heads for when those questions come. When somebody asks if it's legal to, I still get this question, is it legal to home educate? And I can't even believe that people are still thinking that it's illegal after COVID and stuff, homeschooling. But how do they socialize? What about university? These are the questions that you get over and over. So it's helpful to just have these answers, and whether it be, something that you do read from Peter Gray or Naomi Fisher, and just kind of even writing it down so it just sticks in our head. Because when we engage in a conversation and somebody's really strong in their or maybe a little antagonistic, then it might be like, I don't know why, I just do. It's and the bottom line is that answer is okay too, that we just do. It's best for our family. And when the conversation doesn't go as planned, when we get into those kind of more heated conversations, what should we do? Well, if we just kind of stay cool, stay humble, and know that it's okay to just walk away, then then it'll be okay. And actually, let's see, I have here we go. So again, knowing that usually whoever we're talking to also wants the best for a child. That's usually what they want. Then to just kind of try to stay cool and not take things personally, to stay humble and say, you know what, I don't have all the answers, but I know that this is best for us right now. I appreciate your concern, trying to affirm the other person as much as you can. And then, knowing that it's okay to just kind of walk away if it's too much, it's not worth it. So once we feel kind of like, all right, I feel like I'm excited about engaging in my community, in my neighborhood, with people about home ed. I'm excited about initiating conversations, answering questions. Then we might be faced with like, okay, so how do you actually meet people that are outside of the home ed world and talk to them about these type of issues? Because sometimes our actions will speak louder than words. And so what do you and your children, your family, your neighbors, and the greater community have to offer? And I just refer to these as our assets. And these are the ways that we can make connections in our community. And this is when I really start geeking out a little bit about our asset map, in the sense that I just really truly believe that individually, and Julia Black touched on this as well, like as moms, as dads, we have individual strengths and gifts on our own. Our children have their individual strengths and gifts, our partners. And then it becomes really neat because then collectively as a family, we have distinct assets and interests and passions than like another home ed family would. Like we tend to be very, I love the arts and history and these kind of music and but other families would be maybe much more sciencey and these kind of and interested in totally different topics than we are. And then thinking about our greater locality, just meaning the location where we are, our neighborhood, our city, our town, what assets do they have? Meaning what local business, what is the vibe sort of the place that you live? What do businesses have to offer? Are there art studios, music studios? Are there community type centers? So kind of really getting to know the strengths, the assets, the gifts of each of those entities will be the bridges that start to develop these relationships. And let me see what the next, let's go back. Just one quick story about this. The other day I was taking my youngest daughter, she's 6 years old. We were headed somewhere, and a neighbor of ours who knows this daughter very well, because this particular daughter is my only true pet lover. We don't have a pet, but she loves dogs. This neighbor has a dog. She loves his dog, therefore he loves her. And so in getting to know this particular neighbor, I've found out that he used to work at like Sotheby's, like the auction, he and his wife are both in like the auction world, which is a totally foreign world to us. So I was just passing and casually kind of said, I have sort of an idea in my head. His name is Keith. And I said, well, I would love to maybe organize a field trip that you lead for our kids to maybe go into one of these places behind the scenes, or go into a charity shop and just with your eyes, like, what do you look for? And then the conversation went on, and I said, really what I want my children to consider is what gives things worth, what gives things value. And that like triggered this like ding in his mind. And he's a talker anyway. So he just started talking about like, oh yeah, that sounds so good. And we could do this and this. And so, I mean, this was like just, sort of one of these flippant ideas in my head, but I just share it because like people are so wanting to share their gifts with others. And he's recently retired, and so how do we use people's assets, use people's gifts to both benefit them and to benefit us and to benefit the community as a whole? That's why I love, it's like a puzzle, trying to match this person with this person and this entity with this group. And I love it. So how do we put our specific assets, those of our family, to work? Well, 3 main ways is what I've found: filling a need, celebrating, and inviting people to join us, or us joining others in something that's already happening, something that we would do anyways, or something that somebody else would be doing anyways. So let's take a little bit closer look at these. So how can we fill a need? Now, I do want to just kind of give a disclaimer here. My kids, again, are 16 down to 6 years old. And so for the first time in my life, and I've worked part-time on and off, depending on, what stage if I'm having a kid or not, but very much have been available for home editing like full time. And we're just at the stage now where I have a lot more bandwidth to um, use my own gifts to pour into some of these projects and ideas. So you may be at, I at one point had 5 kids under 10 years old. So just please keep that in mind as I share, and don't feel overwhelmed with any. These are just ideas. So filling a need. Um, when you are with young children, it may be providing a moment of respite for a new mom. So if you know of like some new moms in the area, providing your home, just opening your home with all of your young children to encourage a new mom. We've done clothing swaps on our street in our community, book swaps. My daughter actually is the book lover of the, I mean, I am too, but she really is. And she thought, wouldn't it be fun to do a book swap? So we've opened our house to book swaps, which have gone great. We have one coming up if you happen to be in the London area. We've done neighborhood newsletters. One of my daughters put on organized a Macbeth play during lockdown, volunteering at the library, being the point person for your local authority, your council, allotment, collecting food for a food bank, stepping into someone's pain, which, it doesn't seem right to add that on the list, but we've even seen how loss and grief, being able to be free to step into that, especially with our family, has been both an educational and an amazing experience for us. And we've seen the blessing that it's been for others. And we've gotten to know people in very intimate ways by being a little bit awkward at first, but stepping into people's pain. And that's been great. Here are some of the photos that go along with those ideas. So that's my Joe up in the corner there, and trying to make sense of all of the donations that came in for our book swap. And that's a little bit of our main room in our house, and story time online we did for a long time during lockdown. A friend of mine has created one of these little libraries, I guess they're called, right outside of her house. And that's been such a neat way to engage with her community. Our neighborhood newsletter, we've got our Jubilee celebration coming up. And so it usually falls on our family to update, especially those that are not on our WhatsApp group on our street. And then that's another daughter, Lydia, who played Macbeth, and some of the other neighbor kids. So yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that you're just kind of thinking about, okay, your own street, your own place, your own gifts, the gifts of your kids. Like, what small thing can I do to connect? Celebrating is the second way that we can connect. I love to think of every obscure holiday out there and turn it into a way to connect with people or to bring people into our circle. So I love, again, I tend to be more in like kind of the artsy world, but local artists, local musicians, like, how can I make them shine? How can I promote them? Like how can I, allow them to be the inspiration for our kids and our group? And so any kind of holiday like that. We've done poetry walks using this Echoes app, which is really fun. I've hosted different films, kids music gigs at a local cafe. It was just, again, when you start thinking about how do I connect with the community, your brain just kind of always goes there. And I think, let's see, all right, some of these pictures are missing, but you can see in the upper left-hand corner there. Let me try to go back and then see if some of the more of the pictures show up. Hold on. No. In the upper left-hand corner, you can see that's one of my daughters at the cafe. I'm bummed that you can't see the other photo, but the other photo is kind of zoomed out with all the families at this cafe, just enjoying a really laid back but wonderful performance, and all the kids that have gotten to that have worked hard on their pieces got to perform, but not not necessarily again in before a panel of um, what are they called, judges or whatever, for their, for their, to take their exam for their grade, but just in a more authentic, natural environment. So giving people, again, just a different perspective on how to do music and how to do education, how to do life, and again, connecting with the community. And so the story was that my husband and I went in here because it was a new cafe. We saw the piano and you could see it there in the corner. And I asked the owner, I said, does this piano work? And he said, yeah, do you play? I said, no, but I have an idea. And he was so excited because he's like, they're from Spain. And he's like, this is exactly why I opened the place, was to gather people together. And so you just don't even know, like when you're thinking about how do I build, connect community, connect people are often thinking the same thing. And here's even just a picture of our ice cream truck that goes by our street too often. Our kids are blowing every bit of money that they have. And I think one of the kids had built a Lego ice cream truck and gifted it to our ice cream guy. His name is Mandeep. And again, learning names in your community, I think, is really important. And so, and I think it was probably over a year ago that we gifted him this little Lego ice cream truck, but he still has it on the dashboard of his truck. And he often still shows us that he still has it. And so again, just, making these connections so that when the opportunity to share about how and why we do life, it becomes very natural because they know us. The last way how we can sort of engage by doing is simply inviting others to join us in what we're already doing. And this is great. We live in London and we're members to a lot of the galleries here, and because we have a big family, we have like the highest membership that you could get. And so oftentimes we'll have an extra ticket. And so I try, to ask, we have a few elderly people in the street or people who are retired but can still move about, like, hey, you want to come with us on this trip? We've got an extra ticket. And to just, again, an opportunity to build community. We have a book club that we started on the street. Forest play is something that we do with our home ed community. And I bring little kitchen stuff, and we have like a little local orchard here where we are, not far from us. But I found that that's been a fun way to even have the conversation going with preschool, not preschool, but like, young moms who I think have always probably assumed that their kids would be in school, to be able to say, hey, why don't you come to Forest Play? And, it's a great place for your little one to play, but them also be exposed to families doing life in a different way, to just give people another vision of what could be. And we talked about the newsletter. I'm not really sure let's see. I'm just gonna stop this really quickly, just to see if perhaps I can get these pictures back up on the screen. A couple more.
Brittany, it's just so exciting hearing about all these little ways that you can connect and you can grow and you can reach out. And I loved what you just said about actually just reaching out and asking. The worst case is someone says no, right? Yeah. And you've obviously pursued that and pushed that, and all these opportunities have just come. And yeah, it's really exciting to hear. It's very inspiring.
Well, and again, I think that, and sorry about the photos again, you can kind of see there's an artist who he does collage, and we loved his illustrations. I contacted him. I said, hey, would you want to come and do a collage thing with us? and he was super excited. And so, and to be honest, I think he kind of needed a little bit of a boost. So we just, what I've learned is that we just don't even know, like, sometimes we think, oh, I have to be the one. And that's what I want to emphasize. Like, I'm not, I love creating a lot of things, but I also am very aware now of my own limits. um, and so to have discovered the fact that, like, actually it's super awesome to be able to find out how everybody else is gifted and just invite them in to do their thing and use their assets, instead of me trying to create something that is actually not in my gifting at all. And so it's just so much more inspiring to see people, like, doing their thing, and we just don't know in our kids who's going to be the one that just triggers that, like, inspiration in their own lives. So that's a lot of stuff, but again, I wanted to go back and just emphasize that the end game here in reaching out, having these conversations, speaking and doing in our community, is so that this mutual kind of trust happens. And it's it's a bit funny, when a neighbor will say something like, your kids are, I was having a conversation with a friend about, and she mentioned home ed, and I talked about your family, and I told them, like, I have this family on my street, and, like, the kids are really quite normal and happy and friendly. I just, I'm never sure about how exactly to react when somebody says something like that, but I know that it's a compliment. So I take it as that. And so yeah, I think just building that relationship so that when people are in need of a different option themselves, or they're engaged with other friends and family, and they, something in their mind, oh no, I know a family that does that, that home educates, that does this really differently, like, let me connect you with them because I think that they would be able to help in some way. And again, I think all parents are wanting their children to be successful. They're wanting their children to be happy. And oftentimes, I think, they just need a different narrative for their children. And to not have a place where they can find that is awful, right? It's tragic. And I think we've probably all met families who just, their kid just really, really suffered because they felt like we didn't know we had any options. And so the more we engage, the more I think our community will know, like, wow, there are lots of options here in education, in parenting, in life, because that's the broader picture, right? It's not just like educational freedom, it's like parental freedom that we're talking about too. So yeah, and that's it. So again, like, I would really went quickly through some of, like, the ideas and those sort of posters with questions, but ourthrivinghive.com/community will have, like, all of those links and many more links that you probably don't want to go down that rabbit trail. But I'd love to connect with anyone who either has done some fun things in their community that we can incorporate here, or just would love to keep having more of a conversation about what that might look like for your own community. Because again, us all being in different stages of life and different locations, I could see people saying, well, you live in a place where you can do all these things, but, like, I really believe that we are all put in our place for a reason, for this time, and it has to do with our gifts. And so I think it's like, yeah, wherever you are, there's a reason why you're there. And so to be able to kind of use those assets specifically in that place, like, it's really fun. So
Well, you
yeah.
can hear the fun exuding from you, Brittany. You really can. It's wonderful to hear. I'm wondering if anyone's got any questions for you. I'm aware we've got Christine and Rosie in the room, Dore too. I have some questions, but I'm aware I can talk a lot, so I'm just going to see if anyone else has questions first.
I really like what you were talking about, the knowing the answers to the questions, like why are you doing it, your story, your philosophy, and you referred to the elevator pitch or your elevator, which is that explaining it all in like 30 seconds, isn't it? And I know I was connecting with this guy he's really good at connecting in his community, and I asked him, what was his secret? And he said for him, it's loving the person in front of you. Mm-hmm. Often when people have a go at you about home educating or doing something different to what they're doing or whatever, it's their insecurities that are showing up. It's actually hardly ever anything to do with you. So to keep in mind that we love the person in front, love the person in front of you, not listening to their words necessarily, but what is the heart? What's the real thing going on in their lives that we get to contribute to? And you can't see that if you're taking offense at things that people are saying, if you're taking things personally. So I really like that. And then, our kids are older. And so they get a lot of questions. People tend to corner children much easier than what they do the adults, with the questions and the criticisms. So I think it's important also for us to prepare our children with the answers in terms of the why and, our vision for our family and our philosophy and our values and things like that.
Yeah, that's very true. And actually, speaking of kind of assets, so our 16-year-old, she's very bookish, and so she started to volunteer at our our local community library and like an Oxfam bookshop, and I think we have had to walk through kind of with her, especially because she's engaging with other adults, other volunteers that are there, and obviously she would normally have been at school during those hours, and so it's always these, but you're right, we've had to kind of take a step back and like, okay, how do we prep her with answers that, and it's usually it's usually the same questions over and over again, that like once she had those, and now she's great because she's had a bunch of conversations on her own about it and feels very much more confident, and once it is nice to have that sort of in your back pocket to know like, okay, when somebody asks me this, this is what I'll say.
Exactly. And then the other comment I wanted to make also is just that they say that the two main emotional needs that people have is the need to contribute and the need for recognition. And when you're talking to people and asking them to get involved in your home ed journey or in your family, you're actually really meeting the need for them to contribute. And so that's a great thing to do. And I don't know whether it's in the British culture or what it is. We're very reluctant to ask for help. But actually asking people for help gives them that opportunity to contribute. And so you're actually doing them as much of a favor and helping them as much as you're helping your own family. So I think that's great. It brings, what you're doing brings together so many things, which I loved. I love the presentation. Anyway, I'm going to go off sound and let somebody else ask a question. I see Rosie's got her hand up.
Yeah, Rosie.
Hi, sorry, multitasking with a dirty nappy. So we're about to move house to effectively a hamlet. It's a sort of no-through village in the countryside. We're right up at the back. No one's going to come past our house except for two other neighbours who are really close by. And at the moment, I live in a city. So it's quite a change. I wondered, because there's no school, there's no sort of obvious place where we're going to be clashing with the community. Like, you know, some places, if you're the only one who aren't in the local village school, there can be. But whether you've got any ideas of how, you know, when we get there, we say, hey, we're a home educating family and this is what it's like, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because we actually, in our previous job was in North Carolina, in the southwest east part of the US, and we ran a summer camp, and we were on 75 acres in the woods in a cabin on our own.
Wow.
and then moved to London. So we did the exact opposite. But I will say that those, yes, you'll have to be very creative, I think, in the way that you go about building community, and you will need that sense of community just as much as anybody else will. So I think, you know, any kind of community entity that is close enough where you would be able to frequent the library, or any kind of community events or festivals, or, you know, any, you know, things like that, I would start just looking into those type things where people gather together, the parks, and I don't know.
I know there's a little community centre that the village bought and sort of looks after themselves. So there's some sort of something there.
Yeah.
So,
And I mean, again, just if this is on our minds, then we could just be out doing the shopping and, you know, going about our lives and starting these conversations and picking up on, okay, what assets are available here, both for my family, and, you know, what needs are there that we can provide, that, you know, that gift, or fill that need for this community, or, you know, maybe that you know, you can kind of just join in and start a sense of community, you know, have the book swap at the library, whatever it is, that things that don't exist yet. So I think just kind of keeping our eyes and ears open to, in those conversations, just learning little bits about, okay, what does this community have to offer, and what are the needs in this community, and how can I start to now, as I build relationships, just match up those things. And but yeah, I would say, you know, if you're changing nappies, that means that, you know, it may be that you know, opening your house may be the way to go for a while. And that's how it was, I think, for a good 10-15 years. You know, for us, it was like, this is the way that I connect. I say, hey, I can't come to you, but like, come on over, and, you know, I'll have the Play-Doh out and they can play. And so just connecting with those young moms that might just be a step behind you, and school or not, or, you know, just to be an encouragement. I think like what was just shared, I think loving the person right in front of you is the biggest thing. So yeah.
Lovely. Thank you.
Good luck with the move.
I think Brittany as well, just to pick up on that, I think we forget how powerful it is to invite people into our space, because we've all created, like the media creates this fake world of, you know, everything looking immaculate, and, you know, the kids all nicely dressed and they're cooking and every little cookie's all lined up, and, you know, things look nice, but actually the reality is that home can be messy and kids can be messy. And, you know, and I realized when I lived in London and I had my son, and he's now 15, but, you know, when he was little, we had a great gathering in our local park and it was wonderful. But of course, the British weather's not great for parks all the time. And it took me a while to realize actually parents needed a place to gather so that their kids could be. And, you know, our flat wasn't very big and it wasn't ideal, but, you know, it was regular to have, you know, 6 little 2-year-olds leaping off the sofas and climbing up the walls. And, you know, we'd start doing meals together for the kids. And I think that becomes quite a powerful thing. You know, we landed there by default, but I think it's where we invite people into our homes. I don't know if that's different in the States, but there's a Britishness in us, which is like, oh, but they might not come, or they might. And I think it's a wonderful thing, like to be welcomed into someone else's mess, where immediately you can feel real, and, you know, and you're accepted. So you're loved for who you are because you step into someone's imperfectness. And I think that's a really good example of how we can build community, is by saying, hey, this is my space, come come join the madhouse and the
Yeah.
nappies and the,
Mhm.
so yeah, echoing, I think that's a really lovely starting point, particularly when you're new in a community and you don't know people.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
just being authentic sometimes, yeah, speaks louder than anything that we're trying to. We won't have to defend ourselves at that point because our lives will speak for themselves. I think the fact that you genuinely are taking interest in other people and are willing to open up yourself and make yourself vulnerable, your home, yourself, your emotions, or whatever, and yeah, they're not gonna there will be no need for a defense at that point. Yeah.
Brittany, you mentioned an app called the Echoes app. I wondered if you could, I don't know if you have a.
Yeah, so if you look up, I think it's just called Echoes, but maybe I can bring it up really quick. So again, through a community connection, this local art studio had a presentation about this Echoes app, and what it is a geolocated like sound bites.
Mhm.
That makes sense. So what you can do is create a hunt kind of,
Okay.
and then like locate these audio clips in different places and then publish your app or your hunt. Okay, I'm gonna try to, how do I get back here? So I've just
Sounds
found,
fun. I'm liking the sound of this.
so okay, I'm gonna share
Oh,
this.
okay. Echoes.
Here we
Thank
go. Okay,
you.
so
Dora, you
I've
got that
just,
quickly?
I hope that you guys can see this. Yeah.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
can.
Okay. Yeah. So this is our actual thing. It's called Let's Go on a Poem Hunt. And so basically, I invited like our home ed community because again, it's just a way to say like, hey, there's home educating kids in Ealing, and so it's just, and I sent it out and tagged like every Ealing borough thing on Instagram. Like, hey, here's a gift for you guys. Take your families out. And but basically, what it is at our local park here, and I guess you can't see them on here. Oh, but there's maybe 20 different poems that the kids have recorded, and they're all hidden in the park. And so basically, you take this little app, and the kid can find on their app. You just following the little dot into your location is there. You're trying to find little,
Mhm.
and once you hit the whatever radius that you've set for it, then it automatically starts playing the poem where you are.
Love
And
that.
I mean, it could be, I think it was like a poetry thing that we did, I don't know, but it could be like the history of Ealing, and you could have it recorded different little places. It could, so there's so much that you could do with it. I just love the idea. So I thought, well, let's experiment with this and then send it out. So it was just, again, a way to connect with not only the home ed community, but just share a gift with the community at large. And I don't know how many people, you can't really tell, it doesn't say like how many people have actually done it or accessed it. So I don't know, maybe nobody did it, but but we had fun, and the home ed families that participated had fun, and the art studio that actually put the presentation on, like they were really happy that somebody actually used it, because a lot of times when we hear about these cool like things in learning, I don't know how many education workshops I've been through over the years, and it was such a shame because you sit under this teaching and then you're like, wow, that sounds amazing. Like I'll never be able to use that in the classroom ever. Like, but as a home eder, like I love sitting in these things. You're like, we'll do that tomorrow. That's great, So yeah, anyways, that was a fun one.
That sounds fantastic. We'll be checking that one out.
Cool. Yeah, definitely.
And Brittany, if people have like more questions or they want to connect with you, is there an easy way? Is it just to your website?
Yeah, that would be the easiest way. Yeah, I can probably, yeah, actually our thriving hive at gmail.com It's
Okay.
an easy email to remember. And then through the website or Instagram, Facebook. So
Fantastic. So if people have questions, they can ping you a message or
I'd love
follow you on Instagram and see all that you're doing.
talking about it. Mhm.
You can tell it oozes out of you, your passion for community. It's absolutely
Mhm.
wonderful. So thank you.
Mhm.
Do we have any more questions? Anyone else? Nope. All seems quiet. You covered all bases.
All right. Well, thanks so much. This has been wonderful. I always